The clock on the wall ticked past 10 o'clock at night, its rhythmic sound filling the otherwise silent office. Robert Carter leaned back in his leather chair, rubbing his temples as he stared at the stack of documents scattered across his desk. His eyes were heavy from hours of reading reports and reviewing plans for the upcoming product launch. The corporate world never slept, and neither did he, not if he wanted to stay ahead. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, the city of Chicago stretched out like a sea of twinkling lights. Cars moved along the streets below, their headlights creating streaks of yellow and red against the dark asphalt. It was a view that usually calmed him, but tonight it offered little relief. He sighed deeply and reached for his coffee mug, only to find it empty. Setting it down with a soft thud, he glanced toward the door, wondering if anyone else was still in the building. Just then, he heard the faint hum of a vacuum cleaner coming from somewhere down the hall. A moment later, the sound stopped, replaced by the soft shuffle of footsteps growing closer. The cleaning staff must be making their rounds, he thought. Normally he wouldn't pay much attention. They came and went like ghosts, invisible to the executives who worked late into the night. But tonight, something made him look up. The door to his office creaked open slightly, and a woman peeked inside. She was petite, with shoulder-length brown hair tucked neatly under a headscarf. Her uniform, a plain navy blue dress with the company logo stitched onto the chest, was clean but worn, and she carried a small cart filled with cleaning supplies. For a brief moment their eyes met, and she hesitated before stepping fully into the room. "Sorry to bother you," she said softly, her voice carrying just enough warmth to break through the tension in the air. "I didn't know anyone was still here," Robert waved a hand dismissively. "It's fine. I'm just finishing up some work." He paused, studying her face. There was something about her demeanor that caught his attention. She wasn't nervous or intimidated like most people were when they entered his domain. Instead, she seemed composed, almost serene. "You can go ahead and clean if you need to," he added after a beat. She nodded and began moving around the room, tidying up quietly. At first, Robert returned to his papers, trying to focus on the numbers and charts in front of him. But every now and then his gaze drifted back to her. She worked methodically, dusting shelves and wiping down surfaces with practiced ease. There was a grace to her movements, a kind of rhythm that suggested she'd been doing this job for a long time. Curiosity got the better of him. "How long have you worked here?" he asked suddenly, surprising even himself. She turned to face him, a slight smile playing on her lips. "About 5 years now," she replied. "I started not long after my son was born." Robert raised an eyebrow. That must have been tough, raising a kid while working nights. She shrugged, continuing her task. "It wasn't easy, but you do what you have to do. My name's Lisa, by the way." "Robert," he said, gesturing toward himself. Then, realizing how formal that sounded, he added, "Most people call me Mr. Carter, though." Lisa chuckled lightly. "Well, Mr. Carter, I imagine your life isn't exactly a walk in the park either. Running a company like this has to come with its own set of challenges." He leaned forward, intrigued. Most people avoided conversations like this with him, fearing they might say the wrong thing. But Lisa didn't seem fazed. In fact, she spoke with a confidence that was rare in someone in her position. "You could say that," he admitted. "But tell me, Lisa, what keeps you going? What drives you?" Her hand stilled for a moment and she looked thoughtful. "Honestly, my son. He's the reason I get up every morning. When things get hard, and believe me, they do, I think about all the sacrifices my parents made for me. I want to give Ethan the same opportunities they gave me, even if it means working 2 jobs sometimes." Robert nodded slowly. He admired her dedication, though he couldn't relate to it personally. His own success had come from ambition, not necessity. Still, there was something admirable about her willingness to put others before herself. "Ethan, huh? How old is he?" 16, Lisa answered, a hint of pride creeping into her voice. "He's smart too, always tinkering with gadgets and computers. He loves anything to do with technology." This piqued Robert's interest even more. Technology was his world, after all. Does he want to pursue that professionally someday? Lisa smiled, clearly pleased by the question. I think so. He talks about building robots and designing software that can help people. Honestly, I don't understand half of what he says, but I can see how passionate he is about it. It reminds me of myself when I was younger. I used to dream big, too. Robert found himself smiling faintly. There was a sincerity in her words that resonated with him. Dreams are important, he said. They keep us moving forward no matter where we start. They fell into a comfortable silence after that, each lost in their own thoughts. Lisa finished tidying up the office, and as she prepared to leave, she turned to Robert one last time. Thank you for talking with me, Mr. Carter. Not many people take the time to really listen. Robert stood up, extending a hand. Thank you, Lisa. You've given me something to think about tonight. As she wheeled her cart out of the office, Robert sank back into his chair, feeling oddly lighter than he had before. For the first time in weeks, the weight of his responsibilities didn't feel quite so crushing. And as he stared out at the glittering cityscape, he realized that Lisa's words had planted a seed in his mind, a seed that would soon grow into something unexpected. The next morning, Robert arrived at the office earlier than usual. He wasn't sure why he felt so restless. It wasn't like him to dwell on conversations from the night before. But Lisa's words kept replaying in his mind. Her quiet confidence and obvious pride in her son had left an impression on him, one that lingered long after she'd left the building. As he settled into his chair, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story than she'd let on. Robert picked up his phone and dialed his assistant's extension. Good morning, Mr. Carter, came the cheerful voice on the other end. Morning, Robert replied, leaning back in his chair. I need you to look into someone for me. Her name is Lisa Bennett. She works in the cleaning department. There was a brief pause. Lisa Bennett? Is everything okay, sir? Yes, everything's fine, Robert said quickly. I'm just curious about her background. See what you can find out. Employment history, education, anything relevant. Of course, Mr. Carter. I'll get started right away. After hanging up, Robert turned his attention to the stack of papers waiting for his review, but try as he might, his focus kept drifting back to Lisa and her son Ethan. What kind of life had they led? How had Lisa managed to raise a child alone while working such a demanding job? And most importantly, how had Ethan developed such a passion for technology without access to the resources Robert took for granted? By mid-morning, his assistant knocked lightly on the door before entering. Mr. Carter, I have the information you requested. Robert gestured for her to sit. Go ahead. She opened a thin file folder and began reading aloud. Lisa Bennett has been employed by the company for nearly 5 years. Before that, she worked part-time at a local diner while taking online courses to earn her high school equivalency diploma. She never attended college but has consistently shown strong work ethic and reliability. Robert nodded, absorbing the details. None of this surprised him. He'd expected Lisa to be hard-working and resilient, but then his assistant continued, her tone shifting slightly. She raised her son Ethan as a single mother after his father abandoned them when Ethan was 3 years old. According to public records, she juggled multiple jobs during those early years to make ends meet. Despite these challenges, Ethan excelled academically throughout elementary and middle school. Robert leaned forward, his interest piqued. What about high school? Any notable achievements? His assistant flipped through a few pages. Actually, yes, Ethan recently won first place in a regional robotics competition. His project involved designing a prototype drone capable of mapping disaster zones, a concept inspired by his mother's experiences growing up in areas affected by hurricanes. Robert sat back in his chair, stunned. A 16-year-old boy had created something that could potentially save lives. That level of innovation was rare, even among seasoned engineers. And yet here was Ethan Bennett, achieving it despite having limited resources and opportunities. He sounds remarkable, Robert murmured, almost to himself. His assistant smiled. He certainly does, sir. Would you like me to arrange a meeting with Lisa and Ethan? Perhaps under the pretense of discussing scholarship opportunities through the company foundation. Robert thought for a moment. It was a good idea. A way to learn more about Ethan without making things awkward or intrusive. Yes, do that. Set it up for later this week. When the day of the meeting arrived, Robert found himself unusually nervous. He wasn't used to feeling uncertain about anything, but this situation was different. For once, he wasn't dealing with executives or investors. He was meeting a teenager and his mother, people whose lives were vastly different from his own. Lisa arrived promptly at 4 o'clock, Ethan trailing slightly behind her. The boy looked younger than his age, with messy blonde hair and glasses that seemed too big for his face. Yet there was a spark in his eyes, a mix of intelligence and eagerness, that immediately caught Robert's attention. "Thank you for coming," Robert said, standing to greet them. "Please have a seat." Once they were settled, Robert turned his focus to Ethan. "Your mother mentioned that you're interested in technology. Tell me about your recent project, the drone." Ethan glanced at Lisa, who gave him an encouraging nod. "Well, he began, fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. "I wanted to create something that could help people after natural disasters. Like hurricanes or earthquakes. So I built a drone that can fly over damaged areas and map out where help is needed most. It uses sensors to detect heat signatures, which means it can locate survivors even if they're trapped under rubble." Robert listened intently, impressed by the clarity of Ethan's explanation. "That's incredible," he said sincerely. "How did you come up with the idea?" Ethan shrugged modestly. "My mom used to tell me stories about growing up during hurricanes. She always talked about how scary it was not knowing if help would arrive in time. I guess I wanted to do something that could change that, for her and for other people." Lisa reached over and squeezed her son's hand, her expression a mixture of pride and gratitude. Robert noticed the gesture and felt a pang of something unfamiliar, perhaps admiration, perhaps envy. He couldn't remember the last time someone had looked at him with such unconditional love. After asking a few more questions, Robert leaned back in his chair, regarding Ethan thoughtfully. "You're very talented, Ethan. Have you considered pursuing engineering or computer science professionally?" Ethan hesitated, glancing at his mother again. "I'd love to, but I don't know if it's realistic. College is expensive and we can't afford much right now." Robert nodded, understanding the weight of Ethan's words. Many gifted individuals never reached their full potential simply because they lacked financial support. But as he looked at Ethan's hopeful expression, he realized he had the power to change that, at least for this young man. "I want to offer you an internship," Robert said suddenly, surprising even himself. "At my company. You'd work alongside some of the best engineers in the industry, and we'd provide mentorship and resources to help you develop your ideas further." For a moment, no one spoke. Ethan stared at Robert wide-eyed while Lisa covered her mouth with her hand, clearly overwhelmed. Finally, Ethan managed to stammer. "Are you serious? Me? Really?" "Absolutely," Robert replied, smiling for the first time in what felt like days. "You've earned it." Lisa wiped away a tear, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Thank you, Mr. Carter. This means more to us than you'll ever know." As they left the office, Robert watched them go, a strange sense of satisfaction washing over him. He hadn't expected this meeting to turn out the way it had, but deep down, he knew it was the right decision. Little did he realize, however, that this was only the beginning of a journey that would change all their lives in ways none of them could have anticipated. Ethan Bennett's first day as an intern at Robert Carter's tech company felt like stepping into another world. The building buzzed with energy. People moved quickly between meetings, typing furiously on keyboards or huddled together around whiteboards covered in diagrams and equations. For someone who had spent most of his life tinkering with gadgets in a cramped bedroom, being surrounded by cutting-edge technology and brilliant minds was both exhilarating and overwhelming. Robert had assigned Ethan to work with a small team of interns, each tasked with developing innovative solutions to real-world problems. From the start, Ethan proved himself to be not only talented but also deeply curious. He soaked up every piece of advice, asked thoughtful questions, and contributed ideas that surprised even the seasoned engineers overseeing the program. His passion for using technology to help others shone through in everything he did. One afternoon, Robert walked through the open-plan workspace, observing the interns hard at work. When he reached Ethan's station, he paused, watching silently as the boy adjusted the sensors on his drone prototype. The device looked more advanced than the model Ethan had described during their initial meeting. It now featured additional cameras, improved stabilization, and software capable of generating detailed maps in real time. "How's it coming along?" Robert asked, startling Ethan slightly. "Oh, Mr. Carter, hi," Ethan said, adjusting his glasses nervously. "It's going well. I've been testing the new mapping algorithms, and they're faster than I expected. If everything works out, this version will be able to cover larger areas without losing accuracy." Robert nodded, genuinely impressed. "That's remarkable progress. You've come a long way since we first met." "Thanks to you," Ethan replied earnestly. "And everyone here, they've taught me so much." Robert smiled faintly, though his thoughts drifted elsewhere. Over the past few weeks, he'd grown increasingly fond of Ethan, not just because of his technical skills, but because of his humility and determination. There was something refreshing about working with someone who cared more about making a difference than personal gain. It reminded Robert of why he'd started his company in the first place, to push boundaries and create meaningful change. The days turned into weeks. Robert began spending more time interacting with Ethan and Lisa. He invited them to lunch occasionally, eager to learn more about their lives outside of work. During one such outing, Lisa shared stories about her childhood, how she'd grown up in a coastal town prone to hurricanes, and how those experiences had shaped her resilience. She spoke candidly about the struggles of raising Ethan alone, balancing multiple jobs and finding joy in the little victories. Hearing these stories gave Robert a newfound appreciation for Lisa's strength. He admired how she'd managed to instill values of perseverance and kindness in her son, despite facing countless hardships. At the same time, he couldn't help but reflect on his own relationship with his son, Daniel. Unlike Ethan, Daniel had grown up with every advantage money could buy, yet he seemed aimless, struggling to find purpose or direction in life. One evening, after leaving the office late, Robert found himself thinking about Daniel. The contrast between him and Ethan was striking. Where Ethan radiated drive and ambition, Daniel often appeared disengaged, content to drift through life without committing to anything meaningful. Robert wondered if part of the problem lay in the very privileges he'd worked so hard to provide. Had he unintentionally shielded Daniel from the challenges that build character? Lost in thought, Robert decided to visit Daniel's apartment unannounced. It wasn't something he did often. He preferred maintaining a professional distance even within his family, but tonight he felt compelled to reach out. When Daniel opened the door, looking surprised but welcoming, Robert stepped inside. The living room was cluttered with takeout containers and gaming consoles, a stark contrast to the organized efficiency of Robert's office. Daniel flopped onto the couch, gesturing for his father to sit. "What brings you here?" he asked casually. "I wanted to talk," Robert said, choosing his words carefully. "About your future, or rather what you want it to look like." Daniel shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "I don't know, Dad. I haven't really figured that out yet." Robert sighed, leaning forward. "Listen, I'm not here to lecture you, but I've been thinking lately, maybe it's time you found something or someone who inspires you, someone who reminds you of what's possible." Daniel raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite himself. "Like who?" Robert hesitated before answering. "There's a young man interning at the company. His name is Ethan. He's smart, driven, and incredibly humble. I think you could learn a lot from him." Daniel frowned, clearly skeptical. "Why would some intern have anything to teach me?" "It's not about teaching," Robert explained. "It's about perspective. Ethan comes from a completely different background than ours. He's faced challenges neither of us can imagine, and yet he's still pushing forward, determined to make a difference. That kind of mindset, it's rare. For a moment, Daniel didn't respond. Then almost reluctantly, he nodded. Okay, fine, introduce me to him, but no promises. Relieved, Robert smiled. That's all I ask. Over the next few days, Robert arranged for Daniel to shadow Ethan at the office. At first, the two boys were hesitant around each other, Daniel unsure how to relate to someone so different, and Ethan intimidated by the CEO's son. But as they spent more time together, a tentative friendship began to form. One afternoon, while reviewing data from Ethan's latest drone test, Daniel finally broke the ice. So, what made you decide to build this thing? He asked, gesturing toward the prototype. Ethan glanced up, surprised by the question. My mom, mostly. Growing up, she always talked about how scary natural disasters were. I guess I wanted to do something that could help people feel safer. Daniel nodded slowly, absorbing the answer. That's pretty cool, actually. From that point on, their interactions became easier. Daniel started asking more questions, showing genuine interest in Ethan's work. Meanwhile, Ethan began opening up, sharing his dreams and fears with someone closer to his age. By the end of the week, they were brainstorming ideas together, bouncing concepts off each other with growing enthusiasm. Watching them collaborate filled Robert with a sense of hope he hadn't felt in years. Perhaps bringing these two worlds together wasn't just about helping Ethan succeed, it was also about giving Daniel a chance to rediscover his own potential. And maybe, just maybe, it would lead to something greater than either of them could achieve alone. As weeks turned into months, the bond between Ethan and Daniel grew stronger than anyone had anticipated. What started as an awkward partnership quickly evolved into a genuine friendship. They spent hours discussing ideas, debating solutions, and testing prototypes in the company's labs. For Daniel, it was the first time he felt truly engaged in something meaningful. And for Ethan, having someone like Daniel, someone with access to resources and connections, was a game changer. Robert noticed the change in both boys almost immediately. Daniel, once apathetic and distant, now arrived at the office early, eager to dive into projects alongside Ethan. He asked questions, offered suggestions, and even took initiative in areas where he excelled, such as marketing and design. Meanwhile, Ethan's confidence soared. With Daniel's encouragement, he began presenting his ideas to larger teams within the company, earning praise from engineers and executives alike. One evening, after a particularly productive brainstorming session, Robert approached the two boys as they packed up their things. You've been doing great work, he said, his tone warm but serious. I've been thinking, maybe it's time we take this collaboration to the next level. Ethan and Daniel exchanged curious glances before turning back to Robert. What do you mean? Ethan asked cautiously. Robert smiled, pulling out a chair to sit with them. Your drone project has incredible potential, not just for disaster relief but for broader applications too. Imagine using similar technology to deliver medical supplies to remote areas or monitor environmental changes. The possibilities are endless. Daniel nodded slowly, catching on. So, what are you suggesting? I want the two of you to co-lead a new initiative, Robert explained. We'll form a team dedicated to developing affordable tech solutions for underserved communities. You'll have access to funding, equipment, and mentorship from top experts in the field. This isn't just about creating cool gadgets, it's about making a real impact. For a moment, neither boy spoke. Ethan looked overwhelmed, his mind racing with thoughts of responsibility and opportunity. Daniel, on the other hand, seemed intrigued but hesitant. Why us? He finally asked. There are plenty of experienced people here who could handle something like this. Because you bring something unique to the table, Robert replied firmly. Ethan, you understand the challenges faced by people in need because you've lived them. Your perspective is invaluable. And Daniel, your ability to connect with others and think strategically will be crucial as we scale these projects. Together, you complement each other perfectly. Ethan glanced at Daniel, who gave him a small nod of reassurance. Taking a deep breath, Ethan turned back to Robert. "Okay, we're in." Daniel grinned, his earlier doubts melting away. "Yeah, let's do it." The announcement came during the company's annual gala, a lavish event held to celebrate innovation and recognize outstanding contributions from employees and interns. The ballroom was filled with guests dressed in elegant suits and gowns, mingling over hors d'oeuvres and champagne. At the front of the room, a stage was set up with a podium and a large screen displaying the company logo. When Robert stepped onto the stage, the chatter died down, and all eyes turned to him. He adjusted the microphone, scanning the crowd before speaking. "Tonight, we gather to honor those who push boundaries and inspire us to dream bigger. But tonight, I'd like to highlight two individuals who embody the spirit of innovation in ways that few can match." He paused, letting the anticipation build. Then, gesturing toward the side of the stage, he called out, "Ethan Bennett and Daniel Carter, please join me." A ripple of whispers spread through the audience as Ethan and Daniel made their way to the stage. Ethan looked nervous, tugging at the collar of his borrowed suit while Daniel tried to appear calm despite the weight of his father's expectations. When they reached Robert, he placed a hand on each of their shoulders. "These two young men have accomplished something remarkable," Robert continued, his voice steady and proud. "Working together, they've developed groundbreaking technology, with the potential to save lives and improve conditions for countless people around the world. Tonight, I'm announcing the launch of a new initiative led by Ethan and Daniel, Affordable Tech Solutions for Underserved Communities." The room erupted into applause, though some attendees exchanged skeptical glances. Robert ignored them, focusing instead on the boys standing beside him. Ethan's face was flushed with excitement while Daniel stood taller, clearly moved by the recognition. After the initial shock wore off, Lisa emerged from the crowd, tears glistening in her eyes as she approached the stage. She hugged Ethan tightly, whispering words of encouragement before turning to Robert. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice trembling. "This means everything to us." Robert nodded, meeting her gaze. "It's not charity, Lisa. It's an investment in Ethan, in Daniel, and in the future of this company." In the days following the gala, the new initiative gained momentum. Teams were assembled, budgets approved, and timelines established. Ethan and Daniel threw themselves into the work, determined to prove that they deserved the trust Robert had placed in them. Their dynamic proved to be a perfect balance. Ethan's technical expertise paired seamlessly with Daniel's strategic thinking, allowing them to tackle challenges head-on. Lisa watched from afar, marveling at how much her son had grown in such a short time. She often visited the office, bringing snacks or simply checking in to see how things were going. Each visit reinforced her belief that Robert's decision had been the right one, not just for Ethan but for everyone involved. Even Daniel found himself changing in unexpected ways. Working alongside Ethan taught him the value of hard work, humility, and perseverance. For the first time in years, he felt like he belonged somewhere, like he was contributing to something greater than himself, and though he still struggled with self-doubt occasionally, he no longer felt lost. As the weeks passed, Robert reflected on the journey that had brought them all together. He hadn't anticipated the profound impact Ethan and Lisa would have on his life, or on Daniel's. But now, looking at the progress they'd made, he realized that sometimes the most unexpected connections lead to the greatest opportunities. Little did any of them know, however, that the road ahead would test their resolve in ways none of them could predict. Challenges loomed on the horizon, waiting to shape their futures in ways both challenging and transformative. Yet for now, they stood, united, ready to face whatever came next. The months flew by as Ethan and Daniel poured their energy into the Affordable Tech Solutions initiative. Their first major project, a fleet of drones designed to deliver medical supplies to remote areas, was nearing completion. It had been a challenging journey filled with late nights, technical setbacks, and moments of doubt. But through it all, they remained determined, driven by the belief that their work could make a real difference. Robert watched from the sidelines, offering guidance when needed, but mostly letting the boys take charge. He was proud of how far they'd come, not just in terms of their technical achievements, but also in their personal growth. Ethan had transformed from a shy, uncertain teenager into a confident leader who inspired others with his passion and vision. Daniel, once aimless and disconnected, now radiated purpose, finding joy in solving problems and collaborating with people from diverse backgrounds. Lisa visited the office regularly, bringing homemade meals and words of encouragement. She often stayed to watch Ethan present updates to the team or test new features on the drones. Seeing her son thrive in such an environment filled her with pride, though she couldn't help but feel a pang of disbelief. Just a year ago, Ethan had been tinkering with gadgets in their tiny apartment, dreaming of making a difference someday. Now, those dreams were becoming reality. One crisp autumn afternoon, the team gathered in an open field outside the city to conduct the final test flight of their drone fleet. The goal was simple yet ambitious: simulate a delivery mission to a hard-to-reach location using GPS coordinates and pre-programmed routes. If successful, the drones would prove capable of transporting essential supplies like vaccines, water purification kits, and emergency food rations to disaster zones or isolated communities. Ethan stood nervously beside Daniel, clutching a tablet that displayed live data from the drones. "You ready?" Daniel asked, giving him a reassuring pat on the back. "As ready as I'll ever be," Ethan replied, forcing a smile. He glanced over at Lisa, who stood nearby with Robert and the rest of the team. Her presence calmed him, reminding him why he'd started this journey in the first place. With a deep breath, Ethan gave the signal, and the drones hummed to life. One by one, they ascended into the sky, their rotors slicing through the cool air. The crowd fell silent, watching intently as the drones navigated the simulated route, avoiding obstacles and adjusting altitude with precision. Minutes passed, each one feeling like an eternity. Finally, the lead drone reached its destination, a designated drop zone marked by bright orange cones, and released its payload with a soft thud. Cheers erupted from the group as the other drones followed suit, completing the mission flawlessly. Ethan let out a shaky laugh, tears welling up in his eyes. "We did it," he whispered, turning to Daniel. "We actually did it." Daniel grinned, pulling him into a quick hug. "Told you we could." As the celebration continued, Robert stepped forward, raising his hands to quiet the crowd. "Today marks a milestone not just for our company but for everyone who believes in the power of innovation to change lives," he said, his voice steady and heartfelt. "This achievement belongs to Ethan and Daniel, whose hard work and dedication have made it possible. But more importantly, it belongs to the countless individuals who will benefit from their efforts." He paused, glancing at Lisa and then at the boys. "I want to thank Lisa for raising a son as remarkable as Ethan, and I want to thank both Ethan and Daniel for reminding us what true collaboration looks like. Together, they've shown us that no challenge is too great when we combine talent, determination, and compassion." The applause that followed was thunderous, echoing across the field as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Ethan hugged his mother tightly, whispering, "Thank you for believing in me." Lisa kissed, his forehead too emotional to speak. That night, after the excitement had settled, Robert invited Ethan, Lisa, and Daniel to dinner at his home. It was a rare gesture. He rarely hosted guests outside of formal business events, but tonight felt different. As they sat around the table sharing stories and laughter, Robert realized how much these three people had changed his perspective on life. For years, he'd focused solely on success, measuring his worth by profits and accolades. But meeting Lisa and Ethan had reminded him of the importance of resilience, humility, and kindness, and working alongside Daniel again had reignited his hope for the future, not just for his family, but for humanity as a whole. As dessert was served, Robert cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "There's something I need to say," he began, his tone serious yet warm. "When I first met Lisa, I didn't expect much. I thought hers was just another story of struggle and survival. But she taught me that strength isn't about avoiding hardship. It's about facing it head-on and still finding reasons to hope." He turned to Ethan, his expression softening. "And you, Ethan, You've reminded me why I fell in love with technology in the first place. It's not about building fancy gadgets. It's about solving problems and helping people. You've done that in ways I never imagined. Finally, he looked at Daniel, pride shining in his eyes. And you, my son? You've grown in ways I never thought possible. Watching you work alongside Ethan has given me faith that you'll carry this legacy forward, not just in business but in life. Tears welled up in Lisa's eyes as she reached across the table to squeeze Robert's hand. Thank you, she said simply, her voice trembling, for everything. The evening ended with promises to keep pushing boundaries and exploring new possibilities. Ethan and Daniel vowed to continue improving their designs, while Robert pledged to expand the initiative globally. Lisa, meanwhile, quietly resolved to support her son every step of the way, knowing that his journey was only beginning. As they parted ways later that night, Robert stood on his porch watching the car drive away. For the first time in years, he felt truly content. Not because of what he'd achieved, but because of the connections he'd forged. Life, he realized, wasn't about climbing higher or accumulating more. It was about lifting others up and creating opportunities for them to shine. And so, under the starlit sky, a new chapter began, not just for Ethan and Daniel, but for everyone whose lives they touched. Together they proved that even the smallest actions could spark change, lighting the path toward a brighter, more inclusive future.